This is Lorenzo, and this is the Training Routines Taxonomy video series, lesson number 12. It's on the 8th routine, the lift complex, which is a weightlifting routine focused on core development, emphasizing the posterior chain, and it's been designed to help you achieve your 1 repetition maximum benchmark for the deadlift using the MSP exercise protocol framework. Only 5 exercises. See you inside. The lift complex is the third of 4 core chain routines. To the left of our matrix, we can see the routine type that we're dealing with is a complex, specifically a weightlifting complex, focused on core development, emphasizing the posterior chain. So think up back, erectors, glutes, hamstrings, and specifically when it comes to hip hinge movements, a little bit of the quads as well. Together with the bridge, the lift complex has been designed to help us master hip hinge, extension, power. To the right of our matrix, we have our exercise protocol, which is only as good as its ability to fulfill its objectives. And for that, we need a training plan with clearly stated objectives, strategies, and tactics. As mentioned earlier, we have one key objective for this routine. That is to help you master the deadlift, and more specifically, help you achieve your 1 repetition maximum benchmark. For the female recreational athletes, your goal is to be able to lift 1.25 times your body weight for 1 repetition with good form. So for example, if you weighed 60 kilograms, your goal is to lift 75 kilograms. And for the guys, to lift 1.75 times your body weight. So let's say you weighed 75 kilos, your goal is to lift 130 kilograms for 1 repetition with good form. As for our strategy, think of our strategy as the causes of the effects that we want, which means we need to understand what the minimum requirements are for safe, efficient, and effective deadlifts, which are very basic hip hinge mobility, core stability, and hip knee extension strength. Next, as for our tactics, or the ideal training environment we need to implement our strategy, we need an open training zone for our mobility and stability work, a weight training zone for our strength work, and for our equipment, we will need a mat, a barbell, and plates. Okay, so with our objective and strategy in mind and our tactics in place, let's see what the MSP exercise protocol framework looks like as it applies to the lift complex. So for our first 2 exercises in the mobility category, serving as our warm-up, but also an opportunity to address certain mobility deficits, we have the open hip wall lunge, followed by the open hip active cobra, the same as in our bridge routine. For our stability complex, following the 60-second rule. And our third exercise, we have the McGill Big 3, as we saw it in the squat complex. For our fourth exercise, we have the dead hold. An alternative to the dead hold will be the thrust hold. And for our fifth and final exercise in the strength category, following the 30-rep rule, we have the deadlift itself, as well as 2 of the most useful alternatives to the deadlift, the trap bar lift and the hip thrust. The wall lunge, also known as the couch stretch, as we saw it in the bridge routine, is a hip flexor and quadricep stretch, which is very important for opening up the hips. And the reason this exercise is included in this routine is for the simple reason and principle that, as you guys can recall, that if we want to develop maximum power in the posterior chain, we need to develop maximum mobility in the anterior chain, which includes the hip flexors. The wall lunge, especially if you haven't done it before, is a very demanding stretch. So make sure you start very slow. For the progressions to this stretch, make sure that you download the Training Routines Taxonomy PDF. In there, I will have links, not just to the wall lunge, but every other exercise here that will have links to video tutorials showing you how to implement these exercises as demonstrated by the world's best experts. You want to spend a minimum of 3 minutes per leg in the wall lunge before moving on to the next exercise. which is the active cobra. The focus of the active cobra is twofold. It's first to open up the thorax, as well as to strengthen the upper back and low back muscles as part of our core stability strategy. So you want to make sure to contract the glutes as a way to protect the low back while extending the thoracic spine by pushing the elbow down into the ground as well as forward, while slightly externally rotating the shoulders. And you want to hold this position for 2 minutes. Together, the wall lunge and the active cobra, lasting no longer than 10 minutes, helps to fulfill the minimum hip hinge mobility requirements that we need for more efficient deadlifts. For our third exercise, we have the McGill Big 3, as we saw it in the squat complex. It is a 3-in-1 core stability complex that can serve both as a prehab and a rehab exercise for helping us reduce as well as prevent low back pain. It includes the modified curl-up, the side plank, and the bird dog. Altogether, it includes 6 positions, which we will hold for 10 seconds per position, which totals 60 seconds, which we will do for 3 sets, lasting a total of 3 minutes. Alternatively, you could hold each position for 30 seconds for only 1 set, also totaling 3 minutes. Once we're done with the McGill Big 3, we will move to the weightlifting platform where we will implement our fourth exercise, the dead hold. So we can see it over here. It is a static deadlift hold whereby we will select roughly 50% of our 1 repetition maximum for the deadlift. So for example, if we can only lift 100 kilos one time, we pick roughly 50 kilos or maybe slightly less, where we will lift the barbell just 1 inch off the ground, hold it within a deadlift position for 1 minute. The purpose of the static deadlift hold is twofold, is to teach us to activate and stabilize our core in a static position first, but also teaches us to maintain biomechanical integrity of the deadlift in the lowest position, because that's where most people seem to violate most of the deadlift's biomechanical standards. Together with the McGill Big 3, lasting no longer than 6 minutes for both movements, will help us fulfill our core stability strategy for safer, more efficient, and effective deadlifts. Okay, so now that we're done with our preparatory mobility and stability work, we're finally ready to start practicing our main lift for this routine, which is the deadlift itself, following the 30 rep rule. Firstly, it's important that you take the time to first master the biomechanical standards for the deadlift as we see it here before we start adding load to the bar. Once you're confident with the movement, we can start to play with the 30 rep rule. And so for those of you who are new to the 30 rep rule, it's very simple. You only have 30 reps and you can spend it like a budget any way you like. For example, and because there are at least 6 multiples of 30, there are many different ways that you can approach completing your 30 reps. You can do 1 set of 30, 2 sets of 15, 3 sets of 10, 5 sets of 6, 6 sets of 5, and then finally 10 sets of 3. Each multiple has a different focus, but also a trade-off. So for example, if you want to do 30 reps straight, that's good because you can probably do this under 2 minutes, so you can save time, but you have to go very light, and the focus there will be probably more on endurance. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you can choose to go very heavy, focused more on strength. However, you're now going to have to do 10 sets, which means 9 resting periods between each set, which is probably going to take you more than 20 minutes. For those of you seeking an even easier alternative to the deadlift, but with very similar benefits, we have the trap bar deadlift. As you can see it performed over here. The trap bar deadlift modifies the standard deadlift in at least 2 important ways. The first is it decreases the range of motion. The grip is a lot higher. And also it changes the grip from a pronated grip to a neutral grip. Finally, for those of you seeking an alternative to both the deadlift and the trap bar, you can always opt for the hip thrust if you don't have access to barbells or you just prefer machines and more direct stimulus to the glutes. You can exact the leg extension machine and turn it into a hip thrust machine as I did here. Just keep in mind, if you do opt for the hip thrust instead of the deadlift, you also have to opt for the thrust hold instead of the dead hold. This means that in the top hip extended position for the hip thrust, you're going to hold it for a total of 60 seconds following the 60-second rule, followed by 30 hip thrust according to the 30 rep rule. So in summary, the lift complex is a wall lunge followed by the active cobra, the McGill Big 3, the static deadlift hold or the hip thrust hold, and finally 30 deadlifts or 30 hip thrusts.